So I've been lucky enough to hear this story and hear our team describe, prioritize, and execute in detachment thousands of times over the years. But I still remember the first time that I heard it. And I remember listening to Leif and Dave describe that situation, that chaotic, overwhelming environment of combat, and I could see the power of detachment in that story. And I took that lesson and I started trying to go practice that skill. But I don't know about all of you, I've never been in combat. So I couldn't necessarily relate to that example necessarily, even though I could see the power of the tool in the story. And unfortunately, a couple years after that, I was faced with my own overwhelming and chaotic situation that I couldn't have possibly anticipated or trained for. And I was commuting home from work, and I live in rural Mississippi, so there's lots of little two-lane narrow roads to navigate to and from places, and I was on one of those. And as I was headed home, headed west on this road, I was coming up on this big blind uphill curve. And as I was coming up on this curve, I saw this big black SUV going eastbound, so going the opposite direction of me. And it looked like we were gonna go by each other about the time I was hitting that curve. So, I'm hugging the side of the road, trying to make sure I give this guy enough space. And right as we go by each other, out of nowhere, this small little gray sedan comes out from behind that big SUV, drifts into my lane, and hits me head on. And I remember coming to after that, and my whole body felt just weighted down, and the whole left side of my body was radiating pain. And as my vision started to clear, I could see the shattered windshield and the smoke coming out of the hood of the car. And I could smell the burnt smell of the airbag and taste blood in my mouth. And then I started to hear this person on the outside of the car just saying unintelligible things, yelling, freaking out. And I started to feel that panic well up in me. And that's when I realized that I needed to detach. So I took a breath, I let my head fall back on the headrest, I looked around, and I made a call. And in this case, I literally made a phone call. I saw my cell phone sitting in the dash, and I picked it up, and I called 911. And as best I could, I told them where I was, what had happened, and they said help was on the way. But as soon as I hung up, I realized that I was in the middle of nowhere. I didn't know how long help was going to take to get there, and that smoke was still coming out of the hood of my car, and I felt like I needed to get out. So this person is still running around screaming, I can't open my door, and again, I feel the panic well up, and again, I have to detach. So I crawl across, and I get out of my passenger side door, and when I step out of the car, I see the other half of this scene. And all I see is this black mass of hair sticking out of the driver's side window. And the person who was running around screaming has a little boy in his arms with blood on his face. And again, I had to detach and figure out what I could do to make an impact in that situation, what I could control in that situation. And as I reflect on all the decisions that I made during that situation, they're really obvious choices. But when you're in the middle of that situation, in that chaos, in that overwhelming environment, in that thing you couldn't have possibly anticipated, the blinders of chaos take over and you can't see the obvious choices. And the other thing that I realized is that the reason that I could see those obvious choices was because I could detach. And I could detach in that situation because I had been doing it. I had been practicing it every day in the little things. When my 3-year-old screams her head off and I can't figure out how to make her calm down. When my boss frustrates me. When my husband gets on my nerves. I practice detaching. So that's what I hope all of you will go away from today and do. Practice the skill of detachment every day in the little things so that when you're faced with your own overwhelming, chaotic, unimaginable situation, you'll be able to make the right call at the right time.